The Pacific Championship kicks off this weekend and Australia are in big trouble. Tonga will replace Samoa and New Zealand will be looking to go back-to-back as international footy takes over at the end of the season once again. And this year, because of the results from 2023, I think this Pacific Championship is going to be a bit more interesting. I think New Zealand, a lot of people would agree that they are in their most prominent and best period of all time, basically off the back of James Fisher-Harris, Moses Leota, Jerome Hughes, Shaun Johnson, and what the New Zealand Warriors did in 2023. But the Pacific Championship win last year was really the catalyst of what has been just a rapid growth in the popularity of rugby league in New Zealand, which is great to see. And it's going to be great to see Tonga back in the fold once again. They will play Australia and New Zealand for the first time since 2019. Is that I do think there are some big holes in this Australian team. I think Mal Meninga is coaching for his future and has made a big call by dropping some of the key figures, including the former captain and vice captain, who both finished second and third in the Dally M's respectively. It's a fine balance for Australia because it seems Mal is picking a team to build towards the next World Cup, but we can't forget Australia just suffered their worst loss in international rugby league history, and New Zealand, I think they're a weaker team than they are last year. Obviously, they're going to be missing both their starting halves, which does include the 2024 Dally M medalist, but in comes the return of Shaun Johnson. There were rumours that he was going to step in for Hughes and they were put to bed because of a lingering injury, but now he is back and he is ready to rip in for the Kiwis in the 7, and if we get the Shaun Johnson we saw in that final moments of the Sharks game, then New Zealand should be favourites in my opinion going into this. Then of course we've got Tonga, and I do think with all due respect to Samoa, I know they made the 2022 World Cup final and beat Tonga in that quarterfinal, but this Tongan team on paper at least, I think is a much more difficult opposition to Australia and New Zealand. So we're going to preview this, we're going to break it all down, and I'm going to tell you why I think Australia might just be in some hot curry. Now, if you're not sure how the Pacific Championship works, each teams will play each other once, so we'll get 3 rounds of international rugby league before a final. And this year, it seems the final will be determined by the team who finishes on top. Of course, last year Australia finished on top, had to go play in New Zealand, and we all know how that ended. So I guess it makes things a little more interesting now that the top of the ladder is really something important to win. But what's great, and usually this isn't the case in international rugby league, sadly, but all these teams have something to play for outside of just the nation they're representing. Australia and Mal Meninga especially have to rectify the embarrassment of last year's Pacific Championship final loss. New Zealand will be out to try and claim their first back-to-back international rugby league trophy, and Tonga are out to prove that they should become a tier 1 nation. And this is a great opportunity for Tonga because obviously a lot of players are deferring to Samoa, and Samoa basically off the back of that World Cup final, that World Cup appearance, are becoming a powerhouse. But Tonga's like, bruh, don't forget that I pretty much started this whole thing. And looking at all the predicted lineups I've got and the rosters, I think Tonga are a huge sniff to upset one of these big countries because, as I've said, you guys know, most fans call it boring, but off the back of what we've seen with Penrith, with James Fisher-Harris and Moses Leota probably becoming the greatest front row pairing of all time, we know how important the big fickies in the middle are. And on paper, I thought New Zealand last year had such a strong forward pack, it was going to cause Australia problems, and boy, did it cause Australia problems. But now a few injuries have crept into New Zealand. I think Tonga, there's a strong case you could make they have the best forward pack in the competition. No Payne Haas, who had a brilliant Origin series, is huge for Australia. And when you look at this Tonga pack, Adam Fanua-Blake, Paseka, Eli Katoa, Hamole Olakau'atu, Keon Koloamatangi, Jason Taumalolo, Felice Kafusi, Tatili Tupanoa, all those players I just mentioned, you could make the argument that individually are coming off their best years of their career outside of Felice Kafusi, who is going to bring so much experience to these boys off the field. Now, New Zealand's is pretty good too, as you could imagine. They got James Fisher-Harris, in my opinion, the best front rower in the world, one of the best front rowers of all time. Moses Leota is out, but they've still got Joey Tapine, who is also one of the best front rowers in the world, probably first and second New Zealand have in this competition. Their back row isn't as damaging, but you still got Scott Sorensen, you still got Niokore, you still got Isaiah Papali'i, and you're going to have Leo Thompson and Griffin Neame coming off the bench. And Leo Thompson last year was so good for the Kiwis, they actually played Joey Tapine at lock. And it seems there's a lot of uncertainty around Thompson's contract at the moment, so he's playing against the best props in the world, looking to add a few more zeros onto that contract come November 1. Both those forward packs are so good, and Australia isn't too bad either. Paddy Carrigan's in there, Lindsay Collins, Isaiah Yeo, Ruben Cotter, Mitchie Barnett, but it is missing that superstar that I think the other countries have. Tonga's got Adam Fanua-Blake, New Zealand's got Fish, and they've also got Joey Tapine. And it was Taumalolo, it was Andrew Fafita who changed the international game forever when they went to Tonga. Since that moment, it has been the forward packs where it's been the biggest problem for Australia, none more so than what we saw last year. And if we trace our minds back to 2019, Jerry Evans and Cameron Munster, I've never seen a halves combo have to play off the back foot more because Tonga absolutely dominated through the middle. Now, I do think that on form especially, Isaiah Yeo might be the best forward out of that bunch, but I think that the superstar and the overall talent goes to New Zealand and Tonga, and out of those two, I think Olakau'atu, Koloamatangi, and Eli Katoa as a back row blow New Zealand out of the water. I think Tonga have such a strong forward pack, and I think they're going to be reliant on that to get them on the front foot, because when we look at the back line, when we look at the halves combination, that is probably where Tonga are going to struggle. They're going to have a spine of Lolohea at 5'8", Katoa at the halfback, who unfortunately started off red hot for the Finns, but didn't quite have the best end of 2024. They've got Sonny Luke and Havili competing for that number 9 spot, which I think they will share. And then obviously the fullback spot is probably going to come down to the Manly guys, Tulu, Kula, and Hopawade. Kula did the job for them last year, and he's shown glimpses for Manly that he can be a great fill-in fullback. But I don't think he had his best series when he had those chances against England last year from what I saw. Whereas Lei Hopawade, I think Tonga know that he can be the guy that can take him into the future, and he could just be the biggest X factor for Tonga when it comes to competing with these two big dogs. It's a shame New Zealand don't have D Brown and Jerome Hughes, but Sean Johnson is back. He is going to be a huge boost. If anything, just morally, these Kiwi boys are going to be playing so hard for Kim and what is undoubtedly going to be his final run in rugby league. But with the greatest respect to SJ, this is his moment. He is going to add a few thousand fans into those stadiums, but he isn't Jerome Hughes. But the bigger drop-off, in my opinion, is unfortunately Cody Nikorima just isn't Dylan Brown, and we also can't forget New Zealand is going to be without Joey Manu. They will have Chance though, and Chance is more than capable of being a fullback who can be the best player on the field, and their backline, New Zealand, is almost as good as it was last year. Jermaine Asako, Peter Hiku, Matty Tomoko, and Will Warbrick, and the Warbrick has come on leaps and bounds and may just be a top 5 winger in the world. But as good as Tonga and New Zealand may be, when it comes to 1 to 7, this is where Australia usually have the biggest advantage. They've got Dylan Edwards, Xavier Coates, Hammer, Turbo, Lomax, Tommy Dearden, and Mitchell Moses. They've also got Burton, Bradman, Best, who can also come in and do the job if needed. Now that back 5 is good. Best could probably come in too. Hamiso Tabuai-Fidow, at least in the rep arena, may just be the best centre in the world. We saw how good Lomax was in Origin, and in my opinion, Xavier Coates is probably the best winger pound for pound in the entire competition outside of Brian To'o. Now, Turbo is the wild card. If Turbo is fit, then I think the Australian backline is by far and away the best in this Pacific Championship, and this isn't even close. We all know Turbo, when he's fit, he's the best player in the world. We just haven't seen Turbo fit much outside of 2021, pretty much his whole career. And availability is honestly probably the most important fact of any footballer. So Bradman Best comes in. He's no Tommy Turbo, but he can definitely do a job and deserves his spot in this team. And while I think they are without a doubt the best halves combination, there's a big question around Tommy Dearden. He's going to be making his Australian Kangaroos debut as the main 5'8", but the bigger question is around Mitchell Moses. Now, Moses, based off his origin form, definitely deserves this chance, but he hasn't played much footy this year. In fact, he hasn't played at all since the origin decider. So this may go one of two ways. We may see Mitchy Moses come in, pick up where he was in State of Origin and completely kill it, and maybe we end up discussing whether he should be the Australian starting halfback despite Nathan Cleary becoming pretty much the GOAT. But he hasn't played much, and if Mitchy Moses goes down, Ben Hunt comes in, and I love Ben Hunt, he's great, but defensively, at least when he's on an edge and isolated as a halfback as the third man in, he is going to be a massive liability, and even if Mitchy Moses is there, you know these teams are going to target him. So I think we've got three squads that are all on paper very, very good, but I think we're going to see them play three different ways. For Tonga, it's going to be about power. They're going to use these massive, strong, mobile forwards to just Katoa, Lolohea, and Hopewadi the best chance they have to put some points on. They've obviously still got so much strike in the outside backs, but you know Tonga are going to be playing a power game, whereas Australia, the message from Mao will and should be we're going to dominate with the middle, but I just don't think on roster, on paper, that they can. So I think the main thing for Australia is going to rely on Mitchy Moses and Tom Dearden to at least manage themselves through the game, and then they've got the clear advantage in the outside back. Now, New Zealand have the luxury that they can afford a bit of both. They've got a forward pack that I think can probably dominate Australia if they're all at their best. They've got a back line that should, on paper, be able to smoke Tonga. They've also got the class of SJ and Cody Nikorima, who are more than capable of leading them to a win. So it sets up three different sort of styles, in my opinion. And I think the halves combinations are going to be key in these games. I think Mitchy Moses, Tommy Dearden, SJ, Cody Nikorima, and Isaiah Katoa are going to have such an important part of how these games are played. Now, obviously, that makes sense because they literally are the halves. So I'm not breaking any ground here, but I think that's how these games are going to be played. Just very simple. I think Australia need to utilise their outside backs. Tonga have to play a big power game. I think SJ is going to have a big key in how New Zealand is going to play, because I think the game plan for them can change on the fly depending on how these games go. And if I really haven't helped you decide who's going to win this thing, then that's how I feel, because I see if the game goes one way, I could see any of these teams winning. So as for some predictions, it's really hard for me. Now, maybe I'm just seeing not what everyone else is seeing. Maybe I'm underestimating this Australia team, which should be fired up. A lot of these boys are making their Australian debuts. They know they're playing for a potential jersey at the World Cup, but most importantly, they have to rewrite the embarrassment from last year. Not only that, but they finally played Tonga 5 years on from that embarrassing defeat. So Australia have so much to play for. So this Friday night will kick things off. I do have Australia winning that game. But then they've got to go to play New Zealand, and can Australia be emotionally up 2 weeks in a row? To be honest, I don't think so. I think New Zealand at home will get the job done there. But then when I look at a New Zealand v Tonga game, based off the way I think New Zealand are going to try to play, but then also the way Tonga are going to match that with their huge and mobile forwards, I think unless Fisher Harris and Tabane both have monster games, which being the two best front rowers in the world at the moment, they probably will. But there's no way that this Tonga team, with the opportunity that they have based on how good they are on paper, this is probably the best Tongan team I think they've seen. I think Tonga beat New Zealand, and then each team has one win. So the final, the top two teams and the top team will depend on for and against. Obviously, I may just be over the top here, and I may just not be seeing things clearly, but I genuinely think that each team is going to beat each other. If I had to put money on it, I'd probably say Australia can get the better of New Zealand more than I would trust the other teams who get a win. So for that reason, I am going to back my nation here. I am going to be a timid little biatch, so you can give me for that in the comment section down below. So my official prediction is I do think Australia, knowing Mal Meninga is essentially coaching for his future, and knowing that they've probably got the best backline and the best halves combination in this Pacific Championships, that is the reason I'm going to back them here. But I think Tonga as a massive wild card, and I think New Zealand with SJ Day are going to be a huge chance. So the betting odds, maybe they've got it right, and I'm completely overestimating Tonga and New Zealand here, and I am being a little bit of a sook by tipping Australia, but I do think all three of these nations are more than capable with what I'm seeing on paper of winning this thing. Australia are without some key origin stars. Some of them are forced due to injury and suspension. Some of them are because of Mal Meninga. So I just think Australia, I can trust those guys more. I am happy to be wrong though. International Rugby League, I think, could take a whole new leap this year, which honestly, if you remember back to last year, I definitely wasn't a fan of that Pacific Championship. But will New Zealand go back to back? Will Tonga provide an upset? You guys let me know in that comment section down below. Smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't yet already, because we got some international footy to get to before we hit the summer of cricket.